know what you're good at, and then put people around you that can do the rest that you trust, that are good and meeting you at your pace, your budget, et cetera, you'll do better by building a team, and nobody ever does anything alone. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs suffer through trying to do a lot of things that they think maybe they have to do it on their own. Build resources around you so that you can stay in your lane doing what you do best.
Hello, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I am so excited. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Nicole Martin, and she is the Chief Empowerment Officer and founder of a company called HRBoostLLC. And that's a little bit different. We call it the alternative to PEOs. It's actually an HR shared services consulting firm that's based in Chicago, Illinois. And Nicole has quite a bit of recognition. She is known for her professional excellence. She's been honored by multiple organizations, including Mirror Review, 10 Game-Changing Women in 2019, awarding for business excellence by the Chicago Daily Herald. And she was also the 2016 Enterprising Women of the Year champion by Enterprising Women magazine. She is sought after for her knowledge and advice, and she's been featured in newspapers, magazines throughout the country. In addition, she is the host of an online HR in the Fast Lane, and she's also a contributing writer for the Chicago Business Journal. Nicole's also an author. She is the award recipient of the International Literacy Award and also an Amazon bestseller. And she is the author of the book called The Talent Emergency and the Talent Emergency Guidebook, The Human Side of Profitability, The Power of Joy and Purpose. And she's recently released a new book called No Fear Negotiation for Women. So please join me in welcoming Nicole Martin to the platform. Hey, Nicole, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Suzanne. That was a mouthful, darling. So you didn't have to go through all that, but definitely there's a lot of just accolades and things that get out there. And I don't even apply for those things. When they come to me, it's like, yeah, they always try to get sponsorship. And it's like, I'm not in the habit of paying for recognition, right? And the next thing you know, they throw it your way anyway. And so for anyone who's looking for PR out there, just know that you could go with that. And maybe then you'll get your PR award anyway.
Well, congratulations on all those awards. They're definitely not easy to get. So definitely congratulations on that. So, a lot of our audience, they are scaling entrepreneurs and, they range from $500,000 to 50 million plus. And I think everyone at some point starts to wonder, should I outsource this HR function? I know a lot of small businesses, they're approached by PEOs, right? They think they're going to get a lower health insurance benefit or not have somebody under their payroll so they don't have to get higher unemployment insurance. But today, let's talk about, first of all, what is a PEO and what is the difference between a PEO and a shared service organization like yourself? And what are the benefits of one over the other?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in HR in-house, for the record. And so I didn't even know what PEOs or shared service organizations were until about 2013. And I started in HR in 1995. So don't feel bad if you don't know the terminology or what we're talking about, but I'll try to break it down. So professional employer organizations, as PEOs are called, professional employer organizations, is a huge, I want to say $28 billion industry in the United States of America. And it is something that was probably the first arm of HR outsourcing as we understand it. And this is a movement that started over 20 years ago or so. And it's this idea that you could reduce your health insurance expenses, obtain maybe workers' compensation rates at a lower rate, be part of a larger buying group, et cetera. But it was mostly for very large organizations at first. And we're talking thousands of lives within a company. And there it can make sense. It can drive an efficiency. It can reduce costs in certain situations. But we have to remember that it doesn't replace the human experience, the human touch. It doesn't take necessarily fiduciary responsibility. The contracts can be very fixed in nature, where you don't have agility, like a business flexes up and down. As we know, there's all kinds of nuances to how business cycles can go. And so a PEO's model is not necessarily made for flexibility. And I think that they really do check two boxes very well, which might be payroll and benefits. But there are 10 other HR strategy areas that apply under the HR umbrella that they say that they do, but I would beg to differ. And that might be your culture, your employee development, your talent attraction, your employee productivity, all things that hit your P&L, okay? Whether directly or indirectly, they hit your profit and loss. And so when I started understanding what PEOs were, was when I stepped foot into consulting after having my children in 2009, became a mother, and I was like that typical experienced, seasoned, executive that's like, I'm going to have my cake and eat it too, right? So I jumped ship. I decided I'm going to go create another winning workplace because I served on the boards and I was proven in that in my last in-house job. And then I met these guys who buy and sell businesses. And they basically said, Nicole, we really want to build a department from scratch in manufacturing. We want to be on the best place to work. We're looking to sell. We want to grow and scale. And I didn't know that this was a thing, that people just buy and sell businesses for fun back then. I know it now. These people find me, they exist, Suzanne. And so the idea is that they're thinking, how do we do HR from scratch? Well, I had developed a skill set for HR from scratch. And so I learned shared services, and I actually used to call my business in the beginning of its infancy, managed services. A lot of people understand managed services like IT outsourcing. Does that make sense? So I used to say, because I was like those IT firms at the time in 2010 when I started HRBoost, it's like a managed services relationship. We're HR experts, but we're going to manage these services for you. We'll meet you at your pace, your budget. And then I started getting called into rooms and looking at actual agreements with executives of options they were considering, which are PEOs. And that's when I saw the very large price tag and some of the things that I just mentioned earlier that I was like, oh my gosh, that's not HR as I know it. And so what happened was I started servicing my own book of business under HRBoost, and we were doing HR as I know it, which is really starting with discovery and reviewing the 179 line items that are HR, that fall in 11 areas that I rattled off earlier, so to speak, and understanding the pace, the sophistication, the budget, the actual utilization of a client. What are they actually trying to do in their business strategically, right? So HR can't plug into a business properly if it doesn't know the strategy, the pace, the scale, the philosophy, if you will, for the culture invitation to do it right in my book. And so we started meeting businesses that way with a discovery and an education kind of conversation, and then showing them and re-educating them to what HR is. And then saying you can engage our services at HRBoost, for example, on an a la carte basis, which is triage, $99 a month phone client, call us, right? Typical consulting house, 50-50, beginning a scope, add a scope, you name it in HR, Suzanne, we do it. And then retainer. Well, the retainer model started coming to be, I want to say about 2012, when I did that first situation of that client. That's when I put them on a retainer flat rate annual price. And over the years, we've grown to $1 million business essentially, but 80% of our book is retainer. And it's the clients who started to find us, who brought me to the position of 9 years after being in business saying, oh, I'm the PEO alternative. Clients and businesses were trying to figure out how to address their HR needs, but many of them didn't know what HR was. Then they're locked into a contract and they're realizing it's not solving their problems. Right? Payroll and benefits is just two boxes, but you actually lose control of your benefit design the minute you sign a PEO agreement, period. And you actually lose what I think is very important, the connection to employees on who signs their checks. I think that's a huge disconnect. So those two things I take issue with. I think for small businesses who are competing against big businesses, Suzanne, I mean, most of the landscape right now, I have a heart for small business America. I think it's the heartbeat of our country. And you're talking revenues when you were talking about kind of your audience. For me, headcount is where we roll in HR because it ties to compliance thresholds or things that develop in the culture maturity of a client or on their journey to growing. And so for me, it's like you deserve strategic HR day one. The third person you hire might be an equity partner. You need a strategic discussion about that. You deserve that. I think that knowing that someone has your back and is protecting the business assets, et cetera, starts very early from an HR perspective with the compliance. And I think that most of the competition likes to scare business owners that they don't know and that they're checking the box and that this will keep them safe, for example. And that's a misnomer because the day this stuff hits the fan, there's no liability except for the person who owns the business. And I have a real soft spot for businesses in making sure that they get the expertise that they deserve, but they get the expertise that they deserve at their pace and their budget.
I think that's good that you bring that out because, a lot of business owners, they think, oh, I'm using a PEO. They're being filed under the PEO's EIN number for their W-2s, W-3s. And they feel like there's a separation. And the reality is, just like you said, there's not a separation. You are still legally on that hook for that employee and for whatever happens in that relationship.
Yeah.
We saw it hard, for clients that were on POs, for ERC credit versus ones that weren't. The ones that weren't, we could easily file for, but then with the POs, they have to file under their own EIN number. And so they have to deal with their own corporate compliance and tax compliance team, which for a lot of them was quite a nightmare too with that. So, and very expensive also because, CPAs were not allowed to charge a contingency fee, but when you're working with your PO, they can. So they were starting to see a lot of that 10%, 20% of the refund being charged, just because they could legally do that versus a CPA that you can't do a contingency fee on. It's interesting that you talk about
decision.
It is, but who knew that ERC credit would be coming down the pipeline, right? When they signed up for PEOs, right? Absolutely. It seemed like it was, they were told they would get less expensive health insurance, but I find for the most part, it is less expensive to just have payroll separate and just be a payroll function on its own and just file it and do right by your employees personally.
You can still get insurance. I mean, I was a small business myself and I've scaled, and there's so many creative opportunities to provide benefits to your employees on a pre-tax basis. Even if you didn't go with a group kind of plan, you could go with a qualified health reimbursement arrangement, which is an IRS kind of code. You can do a lot of different things to fix your prices. And the bottom line is that you shouldn't be just providing benefits that your employees don't value. And the most interesting thing I found is going to the demographic mix of your employees and deciding what your employees value at their different life stages can be so enlightening in terms of what you're allocating your budget to in terms of your benefits plan design. So for example, in my own business, I had hired seasoned executives, right? People that could hit the ground running in an HR world. And the bottom line is that they were more committed to having 401k and safe harbor match than health insurance. It's enlightening when you ask the employees just what's the thing you value most? And then building your strategy a little around, well, let's design our benefits specifically for our team, and then finding ways and solutions to try and get it where it's almost like a choice cafeteria plan for the different people that are there. Pre-tax, obviously, a vehicle for that if you can get that. And I really think that the most important thing is to keep control of your benefits plan design. And that way you can create a total compensation framework that makes sense, that's really personalized, and the employees will feel the difference in that. And it can be done in a retention strategy way.
Definitely. Yeah. It depends on the workforce, right? For what their needs are, what motivates them for different phases of their careers, as they say.
Right.
So let's talk about building out an HR function, because, a lot of businesses, when you start out, you're flying by the seat of your pants. I know I was, I bought one of those like CDs with a bunch of templates in it and took it to my attorney. And that's where I got started with starting that employee handbook. But let's talk about starting to build out that HR function, starting to create those boundaries, right? Because I can tell you, having that employee handbook has been a lifesaver. You can literally say, this is in the handbook, this is the rule, stop doing that. And if they continue, be able to go on a 30-day promotion period for that. So let's talk about, how do you start to build out an HR function as a small business?
I think the first place to start actually isn't even a place of compliance. It's a heart-based kind of decision, which is, as entrepreneurs or as founders of your businesses, really, you would work for free almost because you're filled with passion for what you're doing. And ultimately, success derives from that. But when you want people to come and work for you, the first thing you should do is look in the mirror and say, why would I work for you? Why would I work for me? And start listing some reasons why somebody should put their handprint on what it is that you're building in your company. Because it has to come from the heart, especially today. We're living right now in probably one of the biggest skill shortages nationally, if not internationally, that we're right in the midst of. This started back in 2014, and we're way past 911 stage. Like, this is triage and bring the oxygen mask out, darling, right? Like, the question is, if you can't afford the talent, you're gonna have to make the talent. And how long does it take to make the talent? No one really did succession planning or anything. So the first thing I would say is, that people are part of the formula of your success in scaling your business. Start with the heart. Why do I work here? What is it that we're doing in this business? And it's something that we didn't get the privilege of getting, Suzanne, when we were coming up and climbing the ladder. But the next gen, they're not going to wait around to climb the ladder if they don't have a handprint on it and feel the heartbeat when they walk in the door. So start with the heart. Why are we here? For example, your business, right? A CPA firm, right? If it's something like this, it's not just crunching numbers. We're not just accountants. We're not just doing this. No, we're keeping people safe. We're protecting their livelihoods, their wealth. We're making sure that what they have is sustainable for the people who work in their businesses, right? So finding the language around something that really makes it deeper is step number one. And then step number two, I think, is really getting that into, well, what are the roles and opportunities here for role clarity? Sometimes people put a bunch of people around in smaller businesses. It's the most infectious thing to have. It's pretty cool, right? When you have tribes and everybody kind of wears a different hat and it's fast paced, it's exciting, right? But once and that's going to work for you, I promise, until you get about 15, 20 employees, then it turns into drama. Right about 15, 20 employees, you need structure, you need role clarity, you need job descriptions, you need a definition of leadership and what it means to be a leader here. And leadership should live at all levels. The hierarchy is dead. So it really should be, I can lead from where I stand, whether that be a strategic leader who defines, an operational leader who is a manager who models behaviors that are expected here, and then grassroots leaders that are brand new people. Day one, how am I invited to live leadership here? So I think those are kind of role clarity things that should happen next. Obviously, to onboard people, you need typical paperwork like you were speaking to. I would say you want to make sure you're doing your I-9 compliance for sure, right? This is something you're familiar with. Your payroll tax, W-4s, whatever, your 1099s if they're independent contractors, making sure that you're doing a 1099 checklist because most people are probably employing employees these days and you don't want to be caught in that situation. I would say that if you have any particular policies, before you're 15 employees, it might just be more of a book of guidelines. I don't know that handbooks need to be a bunch of heavy legalese when you're in a really small business. It's going to be more about expectations and setting expectations clear so that once you're growing past maybe 10, 15, 20 employees, then just like you were saying, Suzanne, there's a reference point where we all stay on the same page so that you have established something for consistency.
Right. And reality of the handbook is it's one of the things that was a big clarity moment for me was realizing that the handbook, it doesn't have to stay the same. You know, the handbook that I wrote 10 years ago is different than the handbook that I use today. 10 years ago, their cell phones didn't do cool things, right?
Right.
And now, every hour you might be battling with Facebook for your employees' attention. And so having rules regarding using personal use of phone, right? Mm-hmm. And being able to work integrity with that is really important. And being able to update those policies to be able to change and flux with that is also very important too. Yeah.
And like what you're gonna practice. Like the handbook shouldn't just be a book on the shelf. It should be a living document and it should be reviewed, I would say, annually. And it's not worth anything if it's not actually lived. Like if your practice doesn't match your policy, that's a red flag. And I think you should also think of the handbook as if it's not communicated proactively and you don't have acknowledgments from every single person that works for you, then it's worthless.
Oh yeah.
People just roll these out and they don't get signatures of acknowledgement. Well, what good is that? And decisions that you make in real time become precedent setting. There's no question about it. So knowing, I think, headcount thresholds is important. Most people don't realize, at 15 employees, things kick in. At 50, obviously, a lot of people understand things kick in at 50 employees. What makes me sad, Suzanne, is the business owners that I meet that don't want to be over 50 because of that. And I'll tell you right now, you can make a lot more money just jumping that little hoop because it's not that big when you know someone like me at HR Boost, right? It's not a big deal. You just got to take care of a few little things. And next thing you know, you could go and double your business, right? Don't be afraid of growing past 50.
Definitely. And, for a lot of business owners, depending on what their background is, I was lucky, the accounting school is part of the College of Business. So we're forced to take business law. We're forced to learn a lot of this. So I knew I need to probably make sure I got my attorney about creating a non-compete agreement or protection of interest agreement, that there might be some regulations and disclosures related to doing a background check. And so I think I was lucky. But if I did not come from a College of Business, let's say I came from a trade school, I might not know that. And so having that partner early on that you can bounce ideas off of to be able to make sure you're in compliance is extremely important.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is some of the energy has shifted. There's a lot of new regulation with what can be put into contracts. Obviously non-competes are not challenged very much any longer, especially in Illinois. I think that I was just at a law conference this morning and this whole non-disparagement is protected under the NLRB, right? So a lot of rights are being threatened from an employer perspective right now. And you definitely want to know employment law attorneys or seasoned people who are up on the regulations because they're changing all the time. And I would definitely think that with the talent emergency and you trying to get skilled talent to work for you, I wouldn't lead with a compliance tone. I would recommend leading with how you can grow here and how you can excel here and how we'd hope that you would continue to see a career path within our business as we continue to grow and scale. I would lead with the energy in that tone versus the compliance tone. Although business asset protection, like you're saying, Suzanne, is extremely important, and having the know enough to be dangerous, so to speak, persona, that you are protecting yourself along that journey.
Right, definitely. And so tell us about, you talk about, you kind of hit on that about people afraid to grow past a certain number, right? They're afraid of what's going to happen. Are they going to violate the American Disabilities Act and things like that? Tell us about why that exists and how do you overcome that? Because it is a problem, right? People are afraid to go to that next level, and so they cut their ankles.
It's really unfortunate because just because I have the seasonality with all those different frameworks of operating under the employment law umbrella, if you will, if you're treating people well and you're actually running your business in a fair and equitable way with consistency and clear understanding of expectations and how we treat people and how people are promoted here, how we pay people, and if somebody gets fired, that it's just cause and everybody understands what that might be in terms of conduct that's expected as standard here. But I don't think that the 20 employees is really where you get into COBRA, for example, ADA, age discrimination, things like that. Those things play out only at termination decisions, it seems like, or if somebody actually does need accommodation for disability. But generally speaking, you're not going to run head on to those situations as a common practice, I feel. You just need to know that they apply to your business if and when those things appear. And so I think that continually growing your business and staying on the visionary path that you are as a leader of your business is important. And just knowing who to call that you trust, that's credible, that has that expertise right about the time that you think you're going there, and then trust the expertise of those people to keep you safe. And so that would be, for example, at 15 employees with ADA, when that kicks in, your only defense when your employee drives home today and gets in a car accident and can't come to work tomorrow because they broke both their legs and they want to come back to work because they need their check, but you're saying, no, I need you to stay home. The first thing I'm going to be looking for is your job description with physical and mental demands. Most people slap together a job description, for example, without physical and mental demands. That's a perfect example of how this stuff hits the fan really fast. And so it's important to have somebody at your resource. What scares me about the PEO model is it's a kind of a 1-800 number thing. And I say at HR Boost, we're not 1-800-HR. I really think that every CEO I've ever worked for asks the question too late, Suzanne. And I mean, every single person who ever's written me a check, they ask the question too late. My firm and our belief is that we are proactive, which means day one, we're going to ask you where you're going in this business so that we can actually show you what you're going to need day one as you go there, so that you can see the forest through the trees and you know what it is. And then hopefully you become more relaxed about that growth strategy and you see, oh, we're working with people who understand these things and they're experts at it. But the idea is that you need a partner and you deserve a partner that is proactive and has that. And I think most of the HR outsourcing things that are out there right now are reactive in nature, and they only do maybe 1 or 2 projects a year. At HR Boost, we might be working on 5 to 8 projects at once for our clients simultaneously. And so my whole problem with call me when you're feeling the pain. No, we want to prevent pain. I should be nice enough that you like me, but dangerous enough that I'm doomsday Mary, so that when somebody calls that they're trying to get something from the business, we're ready for the call. That's who you need on your team.
Definitely. So start before you need one, right? Start before you get in trouble.
Right, with the end in mind. Yeah.
Definitely going to be important for that. So, I'm going to ask the question that I think a lot of these entrepreneurs might have on their mind, because this is the thing I think that we all hate doing. 2 things. One is negative feedback, and second is terminations. Can we outsource that?
Yeah. So what we do at HR Boost is we actually give you a strategic partner, someone that works on the wish list and coaches managers. A lot of people that are at the helm of business, they may or may not have the experience, right? We're promoting a lot of younger people faster right now. And so HR should work as a service department internally. And when it comes to giving somebody constructive criticism, as we like to call it, constructive criticism is something that should be welcomed in the development experience. And I would recommend always going into that conversation with the hope that you are working towards a solution, not trying to manage somebody out of the company. You can actually, if you go into it with that mindset of, I'm going to tee up that we're on the same page here with expectations. And I have a 3-step process for that that's goof proof, that kind of doesn't get people escalated in anger or defensive. When you start triggering people's defensive mechanisms, boy, is it downhill from there. So I think you always have the right to your I voice as a business owner or a manager. And I would say keep it in the I tone and think of saying you only when you're giving compliments. So I expect that you come to work every day at 8 a.m. I observe that you're coming in at 8:20. Why is that? You always end with that question, Suzanne, so that you can hear the reasoning of that person. And as you hear it, then you're going to understand what your next thing is going to be. But don't diagnose it before you've asked the why, because that's where you can run into danger. Maybe she comes out and she says something that she's protected under that we need to know. We don't want to fire her before we hear that, and then she gives a claim to us on the other side. So you gotta, I expect, I observe, why is that? That's a 3-step process that's goof-proof. Terminations. I think the first thing with terminations that leaders should really ask themselves is, did I do everything possible to make this person successful in my business? Because sometimes leaders fail other leaders. If you expected somebody to come in and sink, swim and not sink, but we didn't provide them proper framework to succeed, sometimes that's on us. And if it's on us, then fine, but do have that dignity and respect in that situation to see yourself, to know I didn't set this person up for success potentially. And sometimes they're not the right fit. In Vistage, which is my CEO peer network, we just say something, which is fail fast, right? If you're going to fail fast, take your lesson and learn, move forward, but always treat people with dignity, I think, is really important. It's a scary world out there, Suzanne. I don't know about you, but I mean, there's all kind of workplace violence, people getting shot, killed, all kinds of crazy stuff. Do not underestimate the emotional context of life-changing decisions, and have a heart, have dignity, and let people down softly. Let them know why you're letting them go. Don't leave people in the dark. I think that if you have this mushroom theory of management, which is to keep people under the shade of the trees and they don't need to know anything and they'll still grow, that's hogwash. That's like 100-year-old philosophy that's dead. No, they want to know why. Communicate. And hopefully you're doing it with dignity and only using you when you say a compliment, but I otherwise. And you will succeed in hopefully helping people walk through transitions that just weren't meant to be.
I love it. What an amazing HR coach there for you guys, just to be able to have someone to bounce off ideas and just say, hey, am I thinking about this in the right direction? But very, very strong pieces of advice there, Nicole. Now, Nicole, one of the things that we like to do before we sign off is I love to ask our guests, if there's one piece of advice, it can be personal, it can be business related, that you could leave our guests with. What would that piece of advice be?
I think given your audience, I would just say they're visionaries. I mean, people who start businesses are brave, and people who are growing their businesses are brave. I think they're the heartbeat of our country and our economy. And so if you're one of those people, I think that it's really important to remember that you don't need to be the Messiah. Messiahs, they all get shot. Try to remember that we're not CEO gods, right? We can't be good at everything. And know what you're good at, and then put people around you that can do the rest, that you trust, that are good and meeting you at your pace, your budget, et cetera. You'll do better by building a team, and nobody ever does anything alone. And so that's my best advice. I think a lot of entrepreneurs suffer through trying to do a lot of things that they think maybe they have to do it on their own because they can't afford to outsource it or they can't afford to find it. And I would say in today's world with Upwork.com, or even a boutique HR outsourcing firm where the person that running that firm is an expert at what they do, and they have flexible opportunities for engagement, build resources around you so that you can stay in your lane doing what you do best. And at HR Boost, we honor our CEOs by putting them back where they are so that they can do what they do best, and we can help them continue to have workforce alignment as they grow and build that team. So most people forget that, I think, when they're at the helm.
I love it. Very good advice there. Stay in your lane, do what you're good at, and get the help for the rest. Very, very good advice. Now, Nicole, how can our viewers and listeners find you? How do they work with you to learn more about HR Boost, to learn more about HR and their business?
Well, HRBoost.com is my website. I'm on LinkedIn, Nicole Martin, and we do free consultations. And so people can come to us from anywhere in the country, actually. But in a post-COVID world, as you know, Suzanne, it's like our model went completely national. The first 10 states who found me during COVID on March 13th, when Pritzker shut down Illinois, the CEOs calling me were from out of state, not Illinois. How crazy is that? It's because there's not a lot of resources out there in some of the rural parts of our country. And so just know that in the virtual world that is today, the world is smaller. And at HR Boost, we're happy to give you a free consult and see how we can help you.
Thank you, Nicole. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put Nicole's website and her links on our show notes so that you may contact her to get a consultation and find out, what's your next best step with HR.
And we have a free scorecard, Suzanne, right on our website too. Any 24/7, people can go to the Get My Free HR Scorecard. And what they'll get out of that when they take that, without even talking to me if they don't want to, they will get a free report showing them the 179 line items that are HR with the head counts next to each line item. So you know if it applies to you or not. And that's my free gift. Mwah.
Thank you, Nicole, for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Yeah, it's so nice to be here. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you. Until next time.